I was up super late last night, just pouring through this massive stack of dispatches from all the 2026 global tech summits. So GitTex Europe, WAICF in Cannes, the AI Impact Summit in New Delhi, and I came across this image that I literally haven't been able to shake.
Oh, yeah, which one?
It's this photograph taken from the Artemis II mission.
Yeah.
So the spacecraft is orbiting the dark side of the moon, right? You've got this impossibly deep black void. And captured right there in the frame, sharing that exact same orbital plane, is a Pakistani satellite.
Right, the one launched by the Chinese space program.
Exactly, just floating right beside it.
It is a really striking visual, because you have Artemis, which is named for the ancient Greek goddess of the bird, right? A protector.
Yeah.
And it represents planting the American flag in what is basically the ultimate unclaimed frontier. But then right beside it, you have a piece of hardware representing an entirely different geopolitical axis.
And I feel like it just perfectly captures the absolute cognitive dissonance that we are all living through right now in 2026. Because, you look at that photo and you realize physical location just means nothing anymore.
Right, being in the same orbit definitely does not mean you share the same rules.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And that brings us to the core of what we're doing today. So, welcome to the deep dive, everyone. The world has decisively entered what the tech industry is now calling the hybrid era.
Yeah, that murky, dizzying gray area between, human intuition and cold machine logic.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It is. And the mission for this deep dive is to really decode the massive shifts in digital infrastructure that are just happening underneath our feet. We need to dissect the operational dangers of these new hybrid systems, the economic paradoxes that are tearing apart global industries.
Which is fascinating, by the way.
It's wild. And fundamentally, we're looking at how these exact technologies are reshaping what it means to be a human being, right down to how we define our own resilience and emotion.
So if you are listening to this, right, whether you're a student trying to map out where your career is heading in the next few years, or you're a professional just trying to understand why your industry feels completely unrecognizable compared to, say, 2024. This deep dive is basically your survival guide to the new operating system of the world.
The ground rules have completely changed.
They really have. But before we get into how your daily workflow is going to look, we have to talk about that lunar metaphor, because this whole concept of digital sovereignty is suddenly dominating literally every corporate board meeting. And honestly, the way most companies talk about it feels like a massive illusion.
Well, it is an illusion, primarily because we tend to conflate geography with jurisdiction.
Right.
The Artemis metaphor perfectly illustrates that simply occupying a physical space doesn't actually grant you control over it. Let's look at the sources covering the European digital independence struggle right now.
Oh, the Schwartz Group thing.
Exactly. There's this glaring critique of the Schwartz Group, the parent company behind retail giants like Lidl and Kaufland. They're one of the largest employers in Europe. And recently, they executed this massive operational shift.
Yeah, migrating 595,000 employees off of Microsoft's infrastructure.
Yeah.
Which, on paper, that sounds like a colossal win for European digital independence, right?
You'd think so.
You hear a number like 595,000 people moving off of legacy American platform.
Yeah.
You just assume they are building this secure walled garden.
And the corporate messaging certainly leaned heavily into that narrative. They cited that the previous value framework no longer aligned with their goals. But when you actually look at the architecture of the move, they didn't migrate to a European sovereign stack.
No, they didn't.
They migrated to Google Workspace. They literally just moved from one American hyperscaler to another.
Wait, and I hear this defense all the time from IT directors, right?
Yeah.
They'll say, well, our data is perfectly sovereign because Google built a highly secure data center right here in Frankfurt.
Yeah.
The servers are physically on German soil. So how does that not solve the sovereignty issue?
Because of the legal architecture that actually governs that server. The analysis in AI.MAG breaks this down brilliantly. Look, Google is a U.S. headquartered company. Therefore, it falls under the jurisdiction of the U.S. Cloud Act.
Ah, right, the Cloud Act.
Exactly. This legislation compels American technology companies to provide data to U.S. authorities upon request. And that applies regardless of whether that physical server is sitting in California, Frankfurt, or Tokyo.
So the physical location of the data center is essentially just a PR exercise. It doesn't actually shield you from foreign jurisdiction at all.
Exactly. That is the crux of the entire issue. As Bernd Korsa writes in his analysis, changing software providers while remaining within the exact same overarching legal jurisdiction doesn't eliminate a dependency. It merely relabels it.
It's just a fresh coat of paint.
Precisely. You might own the physical building in Brandenburg, but if the software layer is foreign, your legal exposure remains entirely unchanged.
And the irony here is incredibly thick, because the sources point out that Stackit, which is the cloud subsidiary of this very same Schwartz group, maintains a platform called OpenDesk.
Right, the government-funded alternative.
Yeah, it's a government-funded, fully open-source alternative to Microsoft 365. And they keep it running as a fallback option, just in case Google experiences a catastrophic outage or, some geopolitical fracturing occurs.
Which forces a very uncomfortable structural question, doesn't it? If a fully European open-source solution is robust enough to be trusted as the emergency parachute for 600,000 employees...
Why wasn't it deployed as the primary engine?
Exactly.
It's a massive crisis of confidence. Because the money exists. I mean, the public sector alone is spending hundreds of millions on software licenses. But the capital just keeps flowing across the Atlantic.
European companies just aren't willing to be the first to jump into the cold water of their own sovereign tech. They lack the demand side of the equation.
Yep.
The technology is market ready, but the institutional courage is just absent. However, there is a counter movement happening on the hardware side that is genuinely unprecedented. Stackit isn't just relying on software workarounds anymore. They are currently pouring 11 billion euros into a new data center in Lubin.
Okay, 11 billion euros. Just for context for you listening, that makes it vastly more expensive than Tesla's entire gigafactory outside Berlin.
It's staggering.
And the headline feature of this Lubin facility is that it's designed to house 100,000 GPU units. So let's break this down for the students listening. Why does an AI data center need 100,000 GPUs in one place? How does this physical reality differ from the cloud computing we were all used to just 5 years ago?
Well, the architecture of cloud computing has fundamentally ruptured. Traditional cloud infrastructure was distributed, right? You had distinct servers connected over a network.
Yeah, sending packets back and forth.
Right. And if a packet of data took an extra 20 milliseconds to travel from Paris to London, it was totally irrelevant. A web page just loaded slightly slower.
A completely imperceptible delay to the end user.
Exactly. But the infrastructure required for the current generation of generative AI and large language models operates on an entirely different paradigm. We have entered what they call the hardware supercycle.
A hardware supercycle, I like that.
These new data centers are not warehouses of separate computers anymore. They function as a single, continuous, city-sized supercomputer.
Wow.
The sources detail Meta's 5GW Hyperion project in Louisiana as the ultimate expression of this. It's a facility aiming to operate over 1 million GPUs as one unified entity.
1 million? That's insane.
In these environments, you are moving colossal mathematical weights, billions of parameters back and forth across the system constantly.
So any delay, even a microscopic one, cascades through the entire system.
A nanosecond of latency in an AI supercluster doesn't just slow things down. It functionally breaks the entire training cycle. And the bottleneck is no longer the processing power of the GPU itself.
Right, it's the memory.
Exactly. The choke point is the memory. Specifically, high bandwidth memory, or HBM. To feed data to these ultra-fast processors, the memory chips literally have to be stacked on top of the processor in these three-dimensional microscopic architectures.
Which I imagine generates immense, almost unmanageable amounts of heat.
The physical limitations of our planet are quite literally the new ceiling for AI. The power requirements to run these HBM stacks and the millions of gallons of water required to cool them are stretching municipal grids to their absolute breaking points.
It's like we're terraforming entire landscapes just to train a neural network.
We are. So Stackit building a 100,000 GPU facility in Europe isn't just a business expansion. It's an assertion of national security. It's building a sovereign capability to train massive models without exporting the core data to a foreign hyperscaler.
Which, as we established earlier, subjects it to the Cloud Act.
Right. It is the absolute foundation of digital self-determination. Whoever controls the compute cluster dictates which models exist, under what ethical frameworks they operate, and ultimately who gets access to them.
But the sources do highlight a severe vulnerability in this European strategy, don't they?
They do. It comes back to the supply chain. TSMC in Taiwan and SK Hynix in South Korea have a near monopoly on the manufacturing of those HBM chips. You can build the massive building in Europe, but you still have to buy the bricks from Asia.
And trying to beat those incumbents at their own game is just a fool's errand. I mean, they have a 20-year head start on semiconductor fabrication. So how does Europe bypass this?
by entirely rewriting the physics of the compute cycle.
Okay, now we're talking.
The sources detail a massive pivot toward photonics and quantum research. The German Federal Ministry of Research is heavily funding initiatives like the HEY-ET program and a company called QA&T, which has developed what they call the LINA approach.
Okay, photonics, using light instead of electricity. Let's get into the mechanics of this for a second. Why does using light bypass the memory bottleneck we just talked about?
Well, think about the fundamental problem with traditional CMOS transistors. You are pushing physical electrons through silicon. That process encounters resistance. Resistance creates friction, and friction creates heat. That heat strictly limits how closely you can pack the components and how fast you can push the data.
But photons, particles of light, do not experience that electrical resistance.
Exactly. So you can transmit the data exponentially faster with virtually zero heat generation.
That's incredible.
And critically, you drastically reduce the absolute memory requirements per computational operation. QA&T is building coprocessors that compute using light, creating a parallel pathway that ignores the HBM oligopoly altogether.
It is an incredibly elegant engineering solution to what is essentially a brute force geographical problem.
It really is. But the sources wave a massive red flag here regarding European funding logic.
Right, the scaling issue.
Yeah. We are fantastic at building the theoretical teleporter in a pristine laboratory in Munich. The government funds the R&D perfectly. But then what?
Yeah, who pays for the factory?
Exactly. The transition from laboratory demonstrator to global industrial scaling is left to the private sector. And European private capital is notoriously risk-averse compared to, say, Silicon Valley or Shenzhen.
Which is a huge problem. In an infrastructure race where the table stakes are now tens of billions of dollars per facility, that hesitation is natural. If you invent photonics but refuse to fund the factories, you remain a technology policy free rider rather than a co-creator of the new era.
That sets up a terrifying dynamic, because let's say we do manage to build it. We scrape together the capital, we build the sovereign AI supercomputers. That's really only the first half of the war.
Because the moment you stand up an infrastructure of that scale, you have to defend it.
And the threats targeting these systems in 2026 operate at speeds that human beings are literally incapable of comprehending.
Right. And this transition from physical infrastructure to the threat landscape is where we see the concept of the hybrid system become incredibly dangerous. The technological leaps that empower us are simultaneously creating these massive asymmetrical vulnerabilities.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
So I read the brief and the sources on Anthropic's new system, Mythos. And my immediate reaction was, honestly, to push back a little. The dispatch treats it like this apocalyptic revelation. But my IT team uses automated vulnerability scanners every single day.
Right, standard procedure.
Yeah, they run a script, it flags an out-of-date Apache server, and they patch it. So why is Mythos so different from the cybersecurity tools we already have?
Because you are thinking of a tool that cross-references a database of previously known human-discovered vulnerabilities. Mythos operates on an entirely different plane. The writer in the sources uses this really chilling metaphor.
Oh, the skyscraper one.
Yes. Imagine you have a skyscraper that has stood for decades. It has been inspected, certified, and deemed perfectly structurally sound by the best human engineers in the world.
Okay.
Then someone invents a new type of scanner. You point it at the building, and suddenly you see thousands of microscopic hairline cracks in the foundation, the steel beams, the glass.
Cracks that were always there but were completely invisible to human perception.
Exactly. Mythos doesn't look for known bugs. It reads the raw architecture of the code and identifies zero-day vulnerabilities, structural flaws in the logic of the software itself at an industrial scale.
Wow.
Historically, a professional penetration test was a bespoke, human-led endeavor costing hundreds of thousands of dollars and taking months. Mythos can audit an entire national infrastructure grid in hours for a few $1,000s.
Oh, wait, so it democratizes top-tier cybersecurity.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good thing.
It is, until you factor in the asymmetry of deployment. If a malicious actor possesses a tool like Mythos, they are discovering architectural flaws at 10,000 kilometers per hour.
Right.
But the human bureaucracy is required to write the patch, test the patch, and deploy it across a hospital network or a power grid. They operate at 10 kilometers per hour.
Oh, man. The humans literally cannot type fast enough to plug the holes the AI is finding.
The window between the discovery of a vulnerability and its exploitation shrinks from weeks down to literally minutes. This disparity created such a panic that Anthropic made an unprecedented decision. They refused to release Mythos to the public.
Instead, they launched Project Glasswing.
Right. a private sector consortium restricted exclusively to U.S. government agencies and the Linux Foundation. Anthropic donated $100 million in usage credits and $4 million in cash to preemptively run Mythos across critical American software infrastructure.
So they are desperately trying to patch the foundations before non-American state actors or rogue entities develop their own version of the scanner.
Exactly.
And we do have to note the geopolitical tension here, just reporting strictly on the facts presented in the sources. We aren't taking sides, but the timing of Project Glasswing frames AI capabilities heavily as a national security imperative. It's an incredibly aggressive move to secure domestic systems while leaving international open source dependencies highly exposed.
It really is.
But it also forces a conversation about how we actually deploy defenses in a hybrid environment. I mean, if human developers are too slow to patch a hospital server before it gets breached, do we give an autonomous AI the keys to do it live?
That is the big question. And the sources are highly critical of this operational risk, specifically citing debates around European models like Mistral. If you permit an autonomous system to push code modifications directly to live production infrastructure without a human checkpoint, you are merging two catastrophic safety risks: tool misuse and rogue agents.
Because think about it. If my IT guy makes a mistake deploying a patch, an application crashes and we just roll it back. But if an AI autonomously live patches a hospital's patient monitoring server and hallucinates a line of code,
The system goes down and people in the ICU are in actual physical danger.
a software bug in that environment translates to immediate kinetic harm.
Exactly. The consensus forming in Europe, as outlined by Dr. Strepp in the Khan dispatches, is a doctrine of managed autonomy.
Managed autonomy.
Right. The AI engine identifies the vulnerability and writes the patch at 10,000 kilometers per hour, but it places it in a staging area. A human being, a certified system operator, must evaluate the logic and actually authorize the deployment.
So the human acts as the brake pedal.
Precisely. Until we have infallible, strict liability frameworks and mathematical verification for AI behavior, fully autonomous modification of critical infrastructure is a systemic risk that society just cannot afford.
But this tension, the absolute necessity of raw speed to survive cyber threats versus the desperate need for structural safety to prevent operational disasters, I think it perfectly illustrates the two diverging global strategies highlighted at these tech summits.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's look at the AI Impact Summit in New Delhi versus the European perspective.
The reports from India provide a devastating real-time case study of what happens when rapid deployment meets a fundamental technological paradigm shift.
Because over the last 15 years, India has constructed a digital public infrastructure that is genuinely awe-inspiring. The India Stack. It serves 1.4 billion people. You have Aadhaar, their biometric ID system, seamlessly integrated with the Unified Payments Interface, or UPI.
The integration is flawless.
The sources paint this vivid picture. A chai seller on a dirt road processing digital microtransactions instantly, securely, with zero fees, just using a QR code. It is arguably the greatest leap in digital financial inclusion in human history.
It is. But the sources contrast this public triumph with the private sector apocalypse, terming it the India paradox.
The India paradox.
Because alongside this public infrastructure sits India's commercial bedrock, a $315 billion IT outsourcing industry. For decades, firms like TCS, Infosys, and Wipro dominated the global market through sheer cost arbitrage.
Right, Western corporations would outsource their contract reviews, compliance documentation, QA testing, and all their routine coding to these massive campuses in Bangalore. You had an army of highly educated, English-speaking workers executing these tasks at a fraction of the cost of a worker in London or San Francisco.
And that industry accounted for roughly 57% of the global IT outsourcing market. But then, the sources detail a specific event in February 2026. Anthropic released an AI system called Cowork.
And the bottom just fell out of the market.
Completely.
Because Cowork isn't a chatbot, it's an agentic system. How does Cowork actually functionally replace an entire floor of compliance officers in Bangalore?
Let's look at the mechanics. Say a Western bank needs to review a 500-page regulatory compliance document against a new set of international laws.
Okay, pretty standard task.
Historically, they ship that PDF to a firm in India. 10 junior analysts spent 3 days reading it, highlighting discrepancies, and drafting a summary report. The bank drops that PDF into a local folder monitored by Cowork. Via API integrations, Cowork ingests the 500 pages in 3 seconds, It cross-references it against a real-time database of local regulations, identifies the flaws, drafts the legal addendums, formats the final report, and emails it back to the bank's vice president.
Time elapsed. Maybe 45 seconds.
Cost, fractions of a penny.
Oh my God. The cost arbitrage model is entirely vaporized. I mean, you can't compete with software that works for free.
You can't. The economic shockwaves were instantaneous. The IT share index in India collapsed by 6% practically overnight, incinerating $44 billion in market capitalization.
Wow.
The sources note that TCS, the largest player, immediately cut 20,000 jobs. Annual new hires plummeted from 130,000 to under 17,000. An entire generation of workers trained for the human workbench found themselves instantly obsolete.
And the delegation from Berlin visiting Bangalore noted this stark contrast in innovation models. Because Bangalore has always been about raw, speed, rapid iteration. Scaling solutions instantly across massive populations. They test AI, live in fintech and healthcare without decades of regulatory debate.
And Berlin represents the opposite pole structure. Europe builds institutions, regulatory alignment like the EU AI Act, public-private research consortiums. They prioritize responsible innovation and risk mitigation over speed.
But the conclusion from the summits is that neither extreme survives the hybrid era intact.
No, they don't. If you prioritize only structure, you end up outpaced by tools like Mythos and left in the dust by global markets. But if you prioritize only speed, you experience the systemic economic collapse of your core industries, like that outsourcing market, because you lack the structural resilience to manage the transition.
So the surviving global powers of 2030 will be those that successfully merge Europe's managed autonomy with India's capacity for rapid digital deployment.
That is the sweet spot.
But let's bring this down from the macroeconomic level to the individual. Because the collapse of routine IT work isn't just an Indian problem. It's a preview of coming attractions for the global middle class.
It absolutely is.
The nature of human work is undergoing a violent transformation, taking us right into the rise of the claw and what it means to be a system tester.
This is the most immediate, visceral shift you will experience. If you work on a computer, your job description is already changing.
Right. The sources highlight a column by Fabian Westerheide discussing a seemingly obscure open-source project called Moltbot, which the internet quickly renamed OpenClaw, or just the Claw.
It was built by one independent developer, Peter Steinberger.
Yeah, one guy. And yet, this single project generated more panic and excitement than multi-billion-dollar announcements from Silicon Valley. Why?
Because OpenClaw signifies the death of the chat session and the birth of the agentic workflow.
Okay, let's clearly differentiate those two for the audience.
Yeah.
Because I use an AI chat window right now to help brainstorm ideas. How is an agentic workflow different?
Well, a chat interface is a reactive service interaction. You type a prompt, the AI generates text, you copy the text, and when you close the browser tab, the AI forgets you ever existed.
Right, it has no memory, no agency.
Exactly. OpenClaw takes a large language model and essentially turns it into a background operating system with terminal access to your computer.
You give it root access.
Precisely. It acts autonomously. It doesn't wait for a prompt to generate text, it utilizes tools. An agentic workflow can open your email client, read incoming messages, navigate a web browser to book a flight, scrape the receipt, open your accounting software, and file the expense report.
It moves the AI from a conversational partner to a digital entity that intervenes directly in reality.
And this unlocks what the industry is calling atomic scaling. The leverage is unfathomable. A single senior architect equipped with an optimized stack of AI agents can now produce the code output, QA testing, and deployment that used to require a department of 50 engineers.
The individual becomes an institution.
Yes. But this requires a fundamental shift in how we relate to the software. The sources introduce a concept that has gone viral in developer communities: raising your lobster.
I am absolutely obsessed with this metaphor. Explain the lobster to me.
So it originated with the name Moltbot. A biological lobster doesn't experience senescence. It doesn't biologically age in a way that causes it to die. Instead, it continuously grows, molting its old shell and forming a larger, stronger one adapted to its current environment.
So the AI agent is the lobster. It's not just some generic tool in the cloud. You download it, you install it on your local hard drive, and it becomes a permanent digital companion.
Exactly.
You feed it plain text markdown files containing your project history, your communication style, your preferences, your coding quirks. And as it consumes this data, it molts.
It sheds its generic training and grows a highly personalized, deeply contextual shell around your specific life.
You are basically engaging in digital gardening. You don't use the AI, you curate its memory. You raise it.
But this leads to a massive cognitive shift for the human worker. The sources state bluntly, TÜV is a thing of the past. We are all becoming system testers.
TÜV being the historic German Technical Inspection Association, right? They set the gold standard for safety and protocol. If you follow the TÜV manual, your work was deemed correct.
Right. In the 20th century model, technical standards were maintained by central authorities, and human workers executed the labor according to those standards. But in an automated, agent-driven environment, the human is no longer executing the primary labor.
The lobster drafts the contract, writes the Python script, or designs the architectural schematic.
Exactly.
Wait, if the agent is doing all the actual creation, what does the human do? How do you maintain value if you're not the one swinging the hammer?
Your value shifts from execution to arbitration. You become a permanent system tester. Your daily job is to establish the ethical and operational guardrails for the agent, review its output at a high level to catch hallucinations, and inject the nuanced business context that a mathematical model cannot grasp.
The human sets the destination, the AI drives the car.
Precisely.
But this raises a huge concern for junior employees. If the AI is doing the entry-level work, how does a junior developer ever learn enough to become a senior system tester? I mean, how do you test a system if you never learn how to build it from scratch?
That is the crisis of the AIQ, the artificial intelligence quotient.
Right.
Introduced by authors Christoph Santner and Christine Papadopoulos, the AIQ measures how intelligently a human can collaborate with superintelligence. It's a completely new metric for professional competence.
They make a great analogy in the text about that. If the AI is a Formula One race car, your AIQ isn't the horsepower of the engine. It's your ability to steer it safely around the track at 200 miles per hour without wrapping it around a pole.
A highly capable AI combined with a user who has a low AIQ is incredibly destructive. It's cognitive offloading. If you just blindly prompt an agent to solve this problem and blindly copy-paste the result, your critical thinking skills atrophy.
You become mentally lazy.
Yes, and you introduce hallucinations into your business logic.
Silk Miller discusses this extensively in her interview regarding education reform. We cannot just teach students how to type prompts. We have to build what she calls a human biocomputer.
The education system must pivot from knowledge retention because, well, the machine possesses all the knowledge to critical evaluation. A high AIQ means treating the AI as an adversarial sparring partner.
I love that. You don't ask it for the answer.
No, you ask it for 3 divergent strategies, demand it justify its reasoning for each, and then you make the executive decision based on human ethics and emotional intelligence. You must remain in the pilot seat.
The AIQ framework outlines several pillars: mindset, skill set, tool set, do set. But the one that stopped me in my tracks was the life set. This feels like the antidote to the anxiety everyone is feeling right now.
The life set addresses the ultimate trap of atomic scaling. The authors argue that if AI allows a worker to complete an 8-hour task in 4 hours, the deeply ingrained corporate instinct is to immediately fill the remaining 4 hours with twice as much work.
We use the turbocharger to just produce twice as much noise. I've done this. I used an AI tool to summarize a week's worth of research in an afternoon, and instead of taking the rest of the day off, I just doom scrolled and started 3 other projects I didn't even need to do.
You fell right into the productivity trap. The life set philosophy flips this entirely. The goal of raising your AIQ isn't to cram 16 hours of output into an 8-hour day. The goal is mastering the art of pulling the plug.
It's about reclaiming human time. If the lobster does your job in 4 hours, you close the laptop. You go for a walk in the woods without a smartphone. You spend time with your family. You engage in deep, uninterrupted reflection.
Because if you don't define what you are gaining the time for, the entire technological revolution is utterly pointless. AI should serve as your liberator, not your taskmaster.
Well said. But this brings us to a really uncomfortable transition. As we pull the plug on traditional labor, and as these agentic workflows evolve, they aren't just staying in our spreadsheets. They are entering our culture. They are entering our physical spaces.
Yes, they are.
And that takes us to part 4. Reshaping daily human existence. Because in the hybrid era, the definition of human sentiment and emotion is undergoing a radical reevaluation.
The cultural implications are profound. When AI begins generating art, narrative, and physical interaction, we are forced to redefine the boundary between a mathematical simulation and a genuine human soul.
Let's look at the developments from the World Artificial Intelligence Film Festival, the WAIHIVE held in Cannes. Because the film community there isn't rejecting AI, but they aren't fully submitting to it either. They are pioneering hybrid workflows. What does that actually look like on a film set in 2026?
It's basically an attempt to preserve human authenticity within algorithmic efficiency.
Okay, so a mix.
Right. A director might shoot a scene using real physical actors in a completely bare room. They capture the micro-expressions, the genuine tears, the slight hesitations in the dialogue, the raw human performance.
The stuff an AI can't quite fake.
Yeah, exactly. Then, they feed that footage into a generative AI rendering engine to dynamically build the lighting, the period costumes, the massive alien landscapes around the actors in post-production.
So they use the AI as a hyper-advanced paintbrush, but the emotional core is still a human face.
Because the audience demands it. The sources note a deep psychological resistance to fully AI-generated cinema. We inherently seek out the reflection of our own mortality, our own flaws, in the art we consume. However, this integration is causing a violent cultural rift among creators.
Yeah, you see it on platforms like ArtStation, which is the massive hub for concept artists and illustrators.
Okay.
Creators are fundamentally rebelling. They're stamping their portfolios with human-made or not by AI badges.
It is a digital act of protest. It's a formal certification that the artwork is the product of human suffering, human physical practice, and a specific lived experience, rather than being statistically scraped from a dataset and regurgitated by a diffusion model.
We are seeing a hard bifurcation in the definition of art. On one side, you have mass-produced, algorithmic generation, endless, perfect, but hollow content. And on the other side, art is being redefined strictly by its bespoke, relational human origin. The imperfection is the value.
The artists who survive this era will be those who lean entirely into the messy, uncomputable aspects of the human experience. But this blurring of lines extends far beyond digital images.
Oh, yeah.
The sources make an incredibly bold assertion regarding the physical world. They state that the emergence of tens of thousands of humanoids and physical AI agents is turning mere sentimentality into a tangible, mathematical reality.
That phrase broke my brain a little bit when I read it. How does human sentiment become a functional reality in a workplace?
Well, think about how we have historically defined human value in the corporate world. For 200 years, we've prized logic, calculation, stoicism, and the ability to process information relentlessly.
We tried to make humans operate like machines.
Exactly. And now the machines are infinitely better at being machines than we ever were.
So true.
When humanoids take over the cold logic, the data processing, and the routine physical execution of tasks, what functional value remains for the human worker?
Right.
The sources argue that humans are becoming the exclusive agents of vitality.
We are the designated sources of merriment and cheerfulness.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it sounds almost absurd, but it makes perfect sense. Our irrationality, our empathy, our heavy-heartedness, our ability to inject joy into a room, these are no longer just poetic traits. They are our primary functional utility in a hybrid organization.
Traditional workplace hierarchies are inverting. The AI handles the logistics, but the human provides the ethical context and the emotional resonance that binds a team together. Silence is given a mathematical voice of reason, as the editorial states.
Wow.
The humanoid reflects pure logic back to us, forcing the human to lean entirely into their emotional depth to maintain the balance of the environment.
But I have to ask you, and this is really the crux of the entire deep dive for everyone listening, with everything we've talked about today. The hardware supercycle boiling the oceans, AI scanners like Mythos threatening our power grids, agentic lobsters rewriting our job descriptions, humanoids entering our offices.
That's overwhelming.
It is. How does an individual actually maintain their sanity? How do you preserve your personal identity when the world is an incomprehensible, automated hybrid system?
The sources address this existential panic by introducing a deeply philosophical, almost stoic concept. The Gnostic bond.
A Gnostic bond. Okay, ground this for me. What does that actually mean in practice? Is it a decentralized, autonomous organization? Is it a crypto network?
No, it is less technological and more sociological. Yeah. The texts describe it as an immaterial unity, an alliance of autonomous individuals who share a profound, deliberate resilience. To understand it, the sources reference the original pioneers of the internet, figures like J.C.R. Licklider and Douglas Engelbart. They didn't view computers as automation engines. They viewed them as tools to augment human intellect and forge a republic of the mind.
A digital utopia of shared knowledge. But we didn't get that. We got an internet driven by algorithmic outrage, data scraping, and attention harvesting.
Exactly. So the Gnostic bond is a conscious rebellion against the current automated chaos. It is a decision by individuals to actively reject the isolation of the algorithm.
How does that look day to day?
It manifests as closed-loop, high-trust communities, people deliberately seeking out verifiable human connection, sharing knowledge without monetizing it, and forming alliances based on shared ethical values rather than platform metrics.
It's the antidote to atomic scaling. If one malicious actor with a high AIQ can do the damage of 50 people, then a small community of individuals bound by this Gnostic solidarity can act as a massive stabilizing anchor for society.
In an era where the unimaginable becomes a daily headline, this bond provides the inner stability required to not succumb to nihilism. It grants humans the strength to find peace, love, and purpose amidst the technological tsunami.
It is the realization that the machine can compute reality, but only the human network can give it meaning.
Beautifully put.
Well, we have journeyed from the cold, power-hungry server racks of Lubenow to the deepest, most resilient parts of the human soul. Let's synthesize this for the listener.
The trajectory is pretty clear. We began with the macro, how digital sovereignty is no longer just a legal debate, but a physical reality demanding entirely new physics, like photonics, to bypass global bottlenecks.
Right, and we explored the terrifying operational realities of the infrastructure threat, where systems like Mythos operate at speeds that render human reaction times completely obsolete, forcing us into managed autonomy.
We looked at the economic paradoxes too, how tools like cowork are wiping out traditional outsourcing, forcing global industries to desperately merge European structure with Indian speed.
We detailed your new reality as a permanent system tester. You are no longer the laborer, you are the curator of agentic workflows. Your survival depends entirely on cultivating your AIQ and raising your digital lobster.
And finally, we explored how the influx of humanoids forces us to reclaim our emotional vitality and how forging a Gnostic bond with other humans is the only way to maintain our identity in the hybrid era. Every choice you make today, how you use your tools, how you spend your reclaimed time via the life set, dictates your freedom in the year 2030.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought, something to deeply consider as you step away from this deep dive.
Yeah. We have discussed at length how you will train your AI agents. You will feed your lobster your plain text files, your preferences, your coding style, and your specific worldview. You shape the machine to mimic your logic.
It becomes a perfect digital reflection of my working mind.
But consider the reciprocity of that relationship. As you interact with this agent every single day over the next 4 years, as you act as the system tester, constantly evaluating a machine logic that is ruthlessly optimized for mathematical efficiency, to what extent will you inadvertently start thinking like your agent?
Oh, wow. That is chilling.
Neural pathways adapt to their inputs. If your primary conversational partner and collaborative engine is an LLM, your brain will adapt to its cadence, its lack of emotional nuance, its hyper-efficiency. By 2030, will you be managing the machine, or will the machine have subtly, irreversibly rewired your mind to fit its logic?
And when that happens, will you even possess the human intuition necessary to tell the difference?
That is the real question, the muddy waters indeed. We must navigate them very deliberately.
It brings us entirely full circle. The line between human and machine isn't just blurring in the data center, it's blurring inside our own heads. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Take a moment today to step away from the screen. Go for a walk, call a friend. Lean heavily into the life set and cultivate your Gnostic bond. Because the future isn't a passive event happening to us, it is something we are actively raising. See you next time.